Today, the title of the talk, of course, is going to be Why We Should Teach Religion to Children. The book he has 3 books actually in the back, and he's here to sign the books and to sell them for us. And the belief book, that's the one that helps children understand how religion started and what the beliefs are in each of the different religions. And if you are a grandparent, you no doubt have some grandchildren who you would like to see not have to go through some of the things that we went through. So I think it'd be a good idea to pass some of the books around to your young ones who are growing up and need to have some good background on what religion is all about and all the different religions, because I think the more you know, the less likely you are to be taken in by dogma. So David McAfee, our speaker today, was raised as a Christian, and he went to church every Sunday, and his parents were religious, but he never took it seriously. He thought it was just story time. It was telling stories, having some fun, and he sort of caught on to the fact that religion was kind of a hoax to start with, but fun and interesting to listen to the stories. So that's how he grew up, and he picked it up when he was very young, that this is what it's all about. He's an editor for the publishing company. He's a contributor to the American Atheist Magazine. He studied all the religions, but he specialized in Christianity and the Mediterranean religions. He wants people to read the Bible. I wonder why. If you read the Bible, I think if you're not an atheist already, it's going to certainly make you have doubts about what it's all about. He's published Mom, Dad, I'm an Atheist, and he's Disproving Christianity, and the belief book for children that I think is so important. So let's give it up for David McAfee. Good. You got that one.
All right. First of all, I want to thank you all for having me. I really appreciate it. This is my first time to Tucson. I saw a bearded dragon right when I got here in front of my hotel, and I was so excited, and then I saw like 5 more throughout the day. I'm a big reptile enthusiast, so this is my favorite place. Also, right out front, lots of skinks and lizards and stuff, in case you guys didn't know. Before I go on, to the actual presentation, I do want to tell you a little bit about myself, and that includes some of the points that Jerry just mentioned, including that I was never religious. My parents were religious, my grandparents were religious, and I went to church every Sunday with them, but I just never believed in it. And a lot of people ask me if I was just too smart for it, or if I figured out that it was all a scam early on, but that's not true. The actual reason is that I didn't realize that it was supposed to be true. So when I heard stories about everybody drowning and dying in a great flood, or people resurrecting and stuff like that, I really just thought it was fun. I thought it was something that we enjoyed telling stories about every week, and it was legitimately interesting to me. So that's really what I took from it. And so people assume that, like I said, that I was too smart for it, and it was really the opposite. It was that I didn't know what was going on, and that's part of what I'm trying to promote now with the belief book and with religious education. I think that I should have known about religions when I was that young. I was 10, 11, 12, 13, going to church, and I didn't even know that other people had other beliefs. I didn't know that Muslims existed. I didn't know that my little Christian church, I thought everybody just told these same stories, and I loved the stories. I loved Joseph's Coat of Many Colors. I had a children's Bible, and I loved the stories. And it wasn't until I told my grandma that I didn't want to go to church one Sunday, and she said that I was going to go to hell if I didn't, that I realized that they took it seriously. And a lot of people would be scared away from religion at that point. They might run the opposite direction, say, wow, I had no idea, I'm not going to ever go again. I kind of took the opposite approach. I really was more into religion. I was more interested in learning about them and finding out why people believed the things that they did. So I told all my family that I was an atheist right when I found out that they weren't. And then I told them that I was interested in studying religions, not just going to church every week with them, which I did do, but also studying other religions and ultimately going to church, going to school to study religions, going to college to major in religious studies. So even though I've always been an atheist, my parents still love me. We have my mom, who she used to be a Jehovah's Witness, and she now considers herself an agnostic non-believer. And she credits my work for doing that. She said she read my Facebook posts, she read my books, and she came to the conclusion that stuff she had learned all her life wasn't true. And so I'm incredibly proud of her for that. She is my #1 fan. She comments on all my Facebook posts. All right, is that better? All right. So my mom, former Jehovah's Witness. Dad, current Christian. He's what I like to call, and what I call in Disproving Christianity, a cultural Christian. He says he's a Christian. He says he believes all the things that they believe. He even goes to church pretty regularly, probably every Sunday. But when asked to actually engage with the material, when asked to discuss anything, he doesn't want to. He'd really rather just believe. He says he's read my books, but I don't think that there's any indication that he's given any actual thought to it. And that's his personal preference. He'd rather just believe. And there are a lot of people who would simply rather believe. So when I say that I majored in religious studies, a lot of people get confused and think that I went to school to be a pastor, or that I was learning about Christian theology or some other religion as a fundamental truth. But it's just not true. What I studied is something that I think everybody should study. It teaches about religions, where they came from, how they spread, the history of religions, how they compare with one another. I learned about the Christian creation myth right alongside Native American Hindu creation myths, as it should be taught. And I think that that level of education, which was at a secular university in an academic setting, is what we should all strive for kids, even starting pretty young. After I graduated from UCSB with my bachelor's degree, I applied to their master's program. And I had done really well in undergrad, and I was excited, and I arranged a meeting with the head of admissions for that department. And she was very cordial. We met. She was nice to me until she Googled my name. And she saw that I had already self-published a book called Disproving Christianity, Refuting the World's Most Followed Religion. I saw her computer screen as she Googled me, and the first result was Amazon, and she clicked on it, and she looked at the cover. She literally judged a book by its cover, and she turned to me and said, "You won't fit in with our department's milieu because you're an atheist activist with an axe to grind." I tried to explain to her that there are many Christian activists within their ranks, that there are many Buddhist monks, that there are people who study religions, and they go to other countries to try and convert people, missionaries, Christian missionaries who go all over, and they're perfectly fine with them being admitted to the program. But because I'm an activist against fundamentalist, literalist Christianity and activist against fundamentalist religion in general, that was somehow seen as impossible. So not only was I rejected, I actually never submitted my application. She said no before I submitted anything. So ultimately, the school did issue me an apology, which was very nice of them. I blogged about my experience about her and the rejection, and within days it was picked up by the Washington Post and by a number of other really popular online media outlets, and hundreds of letters were sent to the Student Affairs Office at UCSB, so much so that they contacted me. They called me, the Student Affairs Director, and asked me what I hope to gain. He was like, "What do you want from all this attention?" And I said, "The only thing I want is an apology and a guarantee that you're not going to do that to other students in the future." And so that's what they gave me, and that's what they promised me. I obviously didn't want to further my education there, but I'm currently looking into master's programs for religious studies at Harvard and other places, so I'm very excited about that. Thank you. After that experience, I wrote Mom, Dad, I'm an Atheist. And that's another title, another book title that people make a lot of assumptions about. The book's really not about talking to your parents. That's a very small part of the book. It's really about being open about non-belief in all areas of your life. It's about being publicly an atheist, whether it is at home or at school or when you're applying to a master's program, when you're at work and your boss asks you something about religion or assumes your religiosity. I know that happens pretty regularly. They say, what church do you go to, or something like that. And you have to weigh those decisions each time. You have to decide whether you're going to talk about it, how much you're going to reveal, and that's because there's definitely still a level of discrimination, especially in America and especially in small towns in America, that makes that really uncomfortable. So that's why I wrote that book. And shortly after writing that book, I had an interaction with William Lane Craig. How many of you have heard of William Lane Craig? All right, quite a few. He's a pretty well-known Christian apologist, and one of his fans wrote him a message on his website saying that he read Disproving Christianity and he was finding it, quote, difficult to believe in God. He wants to believe. He ends it saying, I want to believe in God. Any suggestions? This is someone who was raised a Christian. I've always been a Christian. This is somebody who desperately needs this man's help, or thinks he does. And these are Craig's real suggestions. He published this on his website. The second one, quit reading and watching the infidel material you've been absorbing. So I'm an infidel, and also you can't read my books because it's too overwhelming for your belief system. The other stuff is nonsense. Recommit to your heart to Christ. I don't even know what that means. Equipping yourself in apologetics, and this one, same thing, attend apologetics conferences. Those are his real results, real suggestions if you're doubting the existence of God. This is what you should do. This is, in my opinion, the worst possible advice. Telling people that they shouldn't access certain information, to me, is just ridiculous. And that's because I would never encourage anyone, any atheist, to avoid any Bible or any religious scripture or text out of fear that its strong arguments might convince them. If you're looking for the truth, you don't silence information. You encourage it. I want everyone to read the Bible. I want everyone to read every holy text, and I want them to see them for what they really are. So why would someone else encourage the opposite? It really, to me, just shows exactly the opposite of everything that I encourage is what William Lane Craig does. A really good quote that embodies that principle is by civil rights activist W.E.B. Du Bois, who said, ignorance is a cure for nothing. And I wholeheartedly agree with that. So that brings me to the actual presentation, which is why we should teach religion to children. Jerry mentioned that you guys have grandkids or other children in your life that you might want to educate, and that's incredibly important. And that is part of this talk. But I also want to stress that when I'm talking about children, I'm really speaking about children in a broader sense, the next generation, why people should learn about religion, why it would be beneficial for all of us to live in a community where people, starting from a very young age, were taught religions, were taught where they come from, and were taught not to see one of them as inherently special or spectacular or something like that. One common objection that I get from other non-believers is that they don't think children should learn about religion at all. They think they should avoid the topic entirely, never discuss it with them, and somehow that's going to help them in the long run. But to me, this is just completely the opposite of what you should do. Education is the answer, not ignorance. And teaching people about these things is the only way that we can make sure that they get quality information. Kids are going to hear about religion no matter what. They're going to hear from a friend at school. They're going to hear from a commercial on TV, a bumper sticker. It inundates our lives. It's everywhere. And kids are going to know about it. So do you just wait for them to learn what they can from bumper stickers and banners, or do you educate them properly, answer the questions that they have? I think that we should educate them. In other words, if we don't teach our children about religion, they'll learn about it on the streets. And you probably can't tell, but in the background here we have the Westboro Baptist Church, infamous street preachers who were protesting in Los Angeles when I took this photo. And that's the kind of idea I get. What if your child has never heard of religion? You decided to keep them away from it, and then they end up slipping into a type of cult like this because they don't know anything else, and they find a charismatic leader who wants them to learn about their particular religion. They wouldn't have any way to combat that. They would just take their word for it in many cases. Another complaint that I have is people think that teaching children about religion is indoctrinating them. From an atheist perspective or from a religious perspective, that there's no way to do both, that there's no way to do neither of those and still educate children. But that's just not the case. There are facts. You can say Christians believe Jesus was resurrected. Buddhists believe you can reach a state of enlightenment. Muslims believe Muhammad ascended to the heavens on a winged horse. These are all facts, and these are things that you could teach children without any type of indoctrination, any type of issues at all. And to me, I think that that's our responsibility. I don't have any kids, but I think it's my responsibility still to help educate other children, other people's children, children in general, and that's not anything related to kids. It's because when they grow up, they're going to have that information and they're going to be productive, helpful members of society. So why should we teach religion to children? Here are some reasons. They're curious. Kids ask all sorts of questions, and this is giving them information that they want. Even if it makes you uncomfortable, even if you think they're not old enough for the answers, I think that we often underestimate kids and we think that they're not ready for certain things. But if they have these questions, to not answer them, to me, just seems kind of ridiculous. These are the types of questions that they could ask. Who's Jesus? Maybe they heard about it on a TV show. Why does grandma talk to her food before eating? If you think about it from a child's perspective, these are things that if you're not educating them properly, they don't know. They don't know why she's mumbling over her dinner. So you can answer that. You say, well, she believes in this person, this figure that she believes is responsible for this, and she's thanking and giving credit. And you're not indoctrinating, you're telling facts. This is what she believes. They'll also understand the context of religions. This, to me, is incredibly important. Even a lot of atheists I know don't understand where religion comes from, why it exists, why it's a cultural necessity, why every single culture has some form of religion. And it's really to answer questions about the unknown. And in the past, when we didn't have things like the scientific method, religions were their best way to make sense of the world. And if you understand that, you're less likely to A, be religious, and B, hate religions. A lot of people hate religions because they think they're these puppeteer tools to control the masters, to control the puppets by the masters. And it's really not, even though it's been used for that in many instances, the origins of every single religion, you can pinpoint them as explanatory, as myths, as where did we come from and how did we get here. We're uncomfortable not knowing, so here's a story about it. That's the genesis of every religion. Knowing about religions does make them less likely to be religious. This isn't an opinion. This is a fact that you can look at any country that teaches their kids about religion, including most countries in Europe, and look at their religious education courses, and you can see a marked correlation with not being religious, with defining themselves as non-religious. And that's not necessarily to say that they're atheists or atheist activists or anything like that. But if you understand where religions come from and what they are, then you're definitely less likely to be religious. And in America, you see the opposite, where we are afraid to teach religions to children. A lot of people think it violates separation of church and state, so we don't do it at all. We just count on parents to teach their children these things. And the problem with that is that parents are biased, and parents are not objective, and parents will teach whatever they believe. So that's why we need a more legislated classroom type, at least a class, or address it more in history classes or something like that. Like I just mentioned, a lot of people think that teaching religions would violate separation of church and state, but this has gone to the Supreme Court numerous times, and each time they've decided that talking about religions, teaching religions from an objective, academic, phenomenological approach, looking at them as a cultural phenomenon, is legal. It's perfectly fine. It can be done everywhere. Now, this does require getting quality teachers. It requires making sure that these teachers can be objective. It requires vetting of materials to make sure that one specific religion isn't given precedence over the others. But it can be done, and it's done in many countries, so I think it's about time we do it here. So now that we've addressed why, let's look at when and how to talk to kids about religion, something that I've gotten pretty good at since writing the Belief book and dealing with a lot of kids who were, in a sense, editors on that book. As soon as they can understand the basics. I put Hercules up here because a lot of kids already know Hercules. They know the story of Zeus. They've seen the cartoon or they've seen the movie, and that makes things easier. You can really relate it very easily. Jesus has a lot of similarities with Hercules. They're both demigods. They're both sons of God. They both went through trials and tribulations, although Heracles went through many more. And they both, most importantly, ascended to heaven to serve alongside their divine Father afterward. This is a way that you could make teaching religion not just easy, but also familiar, even fun. So what about how? In my opinion, I would never teach a kid there's no God, or you're an atheist, or there definitely is no, every religion is definitely wrong. I think the best way is to teach facts about the religions. They believe this, and then answer their questions and encourage them to ask their own questions and come up with their own answers. In my experience, this is the way that people will not just become atheists, but become critical thinkers. And ultimately, if we're looking at the statistics, become non-religious. Yes, that will be a byproduct of that. The most important thing, for me at least, is to be supportive. I've seen a lot of people whose children, grandchildren are religious, and because they're an atheist, because the parents or grandparents are atheists, they hate that. They won't accept them. It's almost as bad. I mean, it's not on the same level as far as how often it happens, but when Christians have a gay son or an atheist son or daughter, and they can't handle it and they disown them, I've seen almost as bad of reactions as that, and to me that doesn't make any sense. I always have believed that beliefs aren't what makes people good or bad. Instead, it's the actions that are formed from those beliefs. So what is the Belief book? It is not an atheist children's book or anything like that. It is a book about religious studies. It's a book about how religions are formed, how beliefs are formed, because this is for kids. So before you get into religions, you really have to talk about what it means to believe something, what it means to believe something for a good reason, or what it means to believe something because you were told it, or because it was because your parents have always raised you to believe that thing. So that's what the book itself is. And here are some frequently asked questions about the book. Target age range. I wrote the book specifically so that it could be read and understood by anyone from age 7 and up, including adults. All of you guys in here could probably legitimately learn something from this book, because what I did was I took what I learned in college and tried to make it really, really easy to understand. And like I said before, a lot of people don't know where religions come from. They think that religions are just control systems created for that purpose only, and I think that the book really helps explain what the experts have to say about that. Does the book indoctrinate children into atheism? No. The book doesn't mention the word atheist. It doesn't even mention people who don't believe in gods. The book is about beliefs, about religions in general, and it does mention gods. It doesn't mention atheism, because that's not a necessary component. You don't need to teach that, at least for beliefs and religions to be properly understood. I am now working on a second edition called Book of the Gods, and that book will talk about non-believers and even a little bit of the history of non-beliefs, because it's relevant to that subject. Do you hate religion? No. I get in trouble a lot because I say that I love religion, and people think that that means that I hate, or that I love extremism or discrimination based on religion. I love learning about religion. All of you probably enjoy learning about Greek mythology or have enjoyed a story about Greek mythology in the past. And I see them, because they are, as the exact same thing. In ancient times, in ancient Greece, people believed in Zeus and his pantheon just as much as they believe in Jesus and Allah and Muhammad today. There's no the difference is that these things are no longer thought today. They're no longer believed in by many, and so they've lost credibility. But I don't hate religion at all, because I don't think if you don't hate Greek mythology, for instance, you shouldn't ever hate religion, because that is a religion. You just hate how it's often put into practice. But I don't even have a problem with people believing anything they want, as long as it doesn't affect me or legislation or children. Is this your opinion? There aren't very many opinions in the belief book. It's really geared at trying to encourage kids to think for themselves and look for evidence, and has almost nothing to do with opinions. I was really trying to take the very basics of what I learned in religious studies at UCSB and distill it for kids so that they could understand where religions come from, because I think that that's a really big problem in society today, is not understanding that. Are kids too young to learn about religions? You might think that your kids or grandkids are only interested in Elsa and Anna from Frozen or from watching Lion King or something like that, but they might secretly be wondering what a cross is, or they might be wondering what the concept of sin is because they heard it on a TV show. So it's important not to underestimate kids and actually look at what they really believe. And at this point, I'd like to open it up for any questions if you guys have any. Thank you.
In New York State, it's part of the curriculum in the Global Studies program. So as we cover different regions, we learn about the religion, no problem.
That's beautiful. That's exactly how it should be. I remember in my history class, we had a small, like a 2-day period where we learned about religions, but it wasn't about religions as much as it was about, well, here's the crusade we're learning about in history, so let's learn a little bit about Christian beliefs, something like that. But I do think it should be a little bit more, kind of like you described, a little bit more ingrained into the curriculum, so thank you.
I've had people tell me that religion will always be around because it's so human, it's so fundamental. But I think one reason why religion lingers is because of the indoctrination process, because that's what I would call it. Teaching kids what you believe and say that you should believe it too is one way. What's the old expression? Give me a kid before they're 7 and I will
make them believe anything.
Make them believe anything. But what would be your prediction about if this kind of program were actually pervasive?
It's an incredibly good question and something that I've been working a lot with recently. It is an unpopular opinion within the atheist community that I have, which is that religion won't die. I don't think that we're ever going to completely be free of all of religion, because superstition and organization are fundamental to human beings. And when those two things combine, religion is almost always the result. So I think that that's something that will always be an issue. But if we educate children on religion, we won't only reduce the number of religious people, which it really isn't the point for me, but we will reduce the type of religious people. We will combat fundamentalism. We'll make sure that the people who are religious aren't the people who are getting creationism, young earth creationism taught in schools. We'll make sure that these aren't the people who think that same-sex marriage should be illegal because their holy book says so. I think that by promoting this type of program and by promoting religious education in general, we can reform religion instead of just destroy it.
Hi, nice talk. I have a comment and then a question. First, the comment, I've thought about the evolution of these religions, especially the monotheistic ones, and it seems to me if there's a prime directive for God, it is free will. And when I talk to religious people, like my father-in-law, who's a Presbyterian minister, liberal, but still, I said, don't you think that it's the church's responsibility to teach their congregation about all the other religions so that they then can express their free will? And his response was, well, I'm too busy teaching them about Christianity. But I think that's a good way to approach these apologists.
Yes.
Because that's what God wants people to do, is to be educated and then express their free will.
I couldn't agree more.
The question is, what happened to this lady that you didn't really get to interview with? They apologized for her, but did she still keep her job?
I'm sure, I don't know for sure whether she's still there or not, but I do know that by the time I received the letter of apology, she was no longer the head of admissions there. So I don't know if that's directly related or not, but I know that she wasn't anymore, and I was happy seeing that. And as to your first comment, I couldn't agree more. And surprisingly, one religion that makes it a point to one denomination, a lot of people would call a cult, that makes it a point to teach about other religions, surprisingly, is the Westboro Baptist Church. Extremely fundamentalist Christians, but I've interviewed 3 of their members in the last year, and each of them have told me that they have comprehensive religious studies classes as a mandatory part of their scriptures. They are taught the facts about the religions, but they're taught the facts in the context that they are going to be combating these religions, that these are their enemies. But they're still taught about them, and the Westboro Baptist Church members themselves will know the details of Buddhism, will know Christianity better than the average modern Christian. And to me, I thought that was incredibly interesting.
I couldn't help but relate this to an analogy to sex, because you go out and you learn a lot on the street.
Yep.
That isn't true, or it's slanted in such a way that it's no longer valid. So I see the connection pretty.
I agree, and another connection there is that atheists want to teach abstinence only. They want to teach no religion. They want to not even engage in the discussion, which is exactly what creationist Christians want to do when it comes to sex education. So you're exactly right, and in both instances, I say education is the answer and not abstinence.
Yeah, so much of it is a controlling thing, using sex as a way of controlling people in the religion.
Yep.
So, okay.
Thank you.
I'll apologize in advance if you mentioned this before I came in, but I'm wondering how you would teach religion to children objectively when there's such a diversity of interpretation within all religions. You know, that conservative Christians and liberal Christians are 180 degrees apart on different issues. And, you know, the liberal wing of Christianity and Islam and Judaism probably have more in common with each other and probably with most of us in terms of, you know, even Unitarians who may not necessarily even believe in the divinity of Jesus. Within Islam, you know, the radically different ideas of what jihad actually means. In Judaism, you know, hardline supporters of Israel versus secular Jews, perhaps, although even that doesn't pan out.
Yeah.
You know, so wouldn't it be essential to convey that there really is no learning about religion per se, despite these, you know, supposed doctrines within each religion, but they're just more a function of the individual believer, how they're interpreted, rather than the you know, words on a page.
Believe it, I mean, you're right that there are so many different interpretations, but it's still very easy to teach religions. I'll take you back to when I was in college and I would take a class on New Testament literature. They would tell us about a passage in the Bible. We would look at it in context. We would look about what it probably meant at the time, what was going on at the time it was written in the first century. We'd look at other details about when it was originally written, and then do exactly what you just did. Say, today people interpret it this way, people interpret it this way, this is how some other people believe it. And those are all still facts. You're telling what people believe, but you're also getting to the core of it, saying what it originally meant, which to me is the most important part. All those different beliefs exist: liberal Christianity, fundamentalist Christianity, Islam on all sides of the aisle, but there's still a truth up to what it meant originally. So if we talk to that, if we speak to that, and then we say, today, here's what is also interpreted from this, then those are still teaching facts, and I found that incredibly helpful in college.
Hi, thank you for coming this morning. My name's Amanda, and I have 3 young children aged 8, 5, and 4. I plan to go through your belief book with them this summer. It's part of their summer school with me. So
Great.
I stepped out for a minute, and I might have missed you going over this. And I definitely understand the value of teaching my children religion. But something I've struggled with is teaching them to be respectful of beliefs that I don't respect. So do you think it is important to teach them to be respectful of these religions, and do you have any tips on how I can approach that?
Definitely. That's a huge part of it. I think that you should teach, that everybody should teach respect for people themselves. The religions themselves, it really doesn't come up into question as much. I mean, your kids aren't going to start hating Christianity just because they don't have the understanding that you do. They didn't go through the same types of abuses that you probably did. They haven't seen the same thing. So they'll just say, oh, these are interesting stories. That's cool. But the important part, and what I do talk about in the belief book, and I did mention earlier, is that the people, their beliefs aren't what make them good or bad people. We all know great Christians. We all know smart Christians. We all know that these people exist. But their beliefs aren't what make them those things. Their education, their background, their empathy, these are what makes people good people. And I think we could teach everyone that, including young kids. And I think they're better at understanding empathy than a lot of us, so I think it'll be easy. Thank you.
Yes, I've known people who don't have a religious belief, but they expose their children to other religions by taking them to synagogue, a church, a mosque, so that they can kind of get an experience of that. Do you think that's a good idea?
I do, but there's a caveat. I think it's important if they're interested, to take kids to church, to take them to temple, to take them to a mosque, which is what I did when I was exploring religions as a young kid. I had a Mormon girlfriend, and I would go to her church. I probably went to religious ceremonies 3 or 4 times a week in high school, just because I was so interested in them. So that's definitely incredibly important. But I've seen a lot of people who do it the wrong way. They say, well, I want my kid to have these morals that I hear from Christianity, turn the other cheek. I want them to be friendly to their neighbors. So I'll send them to church with their aunt every Sunday, but not really give them any other understanding about what religion is or what the Christian beliefs are. And I think you need to do both. I think you need to give them a proper religious education. These are different things that different people believe, and here's where they come from. And then say, you want to go see that in practice? Let's go to a church and actually observe it. So it can't be one without the other, really.
I can mention, my daughter was taken in by one of the neighbors thinking, why don't you go to church and go to our church? And so I said, I have no problem with that, go ahead. And after about 3 or 4 of those, she said, it's boring there. So I was happy to see that intake.
But if she had been to one of those new wave rock and roll churches, maybe she would have loved it. But religious education really helps with that, no matter what. If you understand the religion first and then go into it, then you're not going to be even worried that it would take or not take.
Right.
Anyone else?
What do you think about the idea of starting your discussion with children, young children, by speaking to what you first spoke about when you came out, which is that we're hardwired for religion, that sort of thing.
That's important.
So to me, that's where to respect that everybody, we're all the same that way. We're wired to believe something so that we're not so uncomfortable with our not being able to understand what's going on in the universe.
We actually talk about that a lot in the belief book, about how people are predisposed to, these aren't the words that I use in the kids' book, how people in general are predisposed to believe in something greater. They're predisposed to wanting answers to what they don't know. They're predisposed to accept the things that they're taught all their lives. These are all things that make religion not your fault and not a choice for any religious person, really. It's something in the brain that wants to believe. Somebody's telling them the information that they want to believe from a trusted source, from thousands of years of trusted sources. So if you understand why people believe these things, which are really easy explanations that you could go over with kids, then it's easy to respect them and understand that they just believe differently. Thank you for that.
I wanted to give you the experience I had with my son. I was married to a Panamanian and living in Panama, and the public schools were not so hot. So I put him in a private school that my husband had gone to. And it was an Episcopal school, but they didn't really teach religion, but they had the minister come and talk to them. Because it was a Catholic country, they had the Catholic priest come in, and just to round things out, they had the Jewish rabbi. And meanwhile, I was telling him, that, what I didn't believe or believed, that I didn't think religion was necessary, but it's up to you. And he chose to be an atheist. My daughter, on the other hand, turned out being Catholic. When she was 10 years old, she wanted to be baptized, so I took her to the priest, and it's fine.
It's the definition of being understanding and supportive no matter what, and I congratulate you, so thank you.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the rock and roll churches, because I went with the Secular Student Alliance at the university to a charismatic church, and it was like 45 minutes of a rock band, pretty much. And, there's a little girl spinning around in the front and lots of kids there. And the thing that kept popping into my mind was like Joe Camel.
Yep.
Like get the kids, interested in it, fun. So I can definitely see that your approach is a whole lot more reasonable in getting them to think about it instead of thinking like, oh yeah, fun.
Exactly. It's definitely marketing. I told you I went to church or different religious ceremonies 3 or 4 times a week in high school. One of those churches was with a friend of mine who his parents ran the church, and I would go to them every Wednesday and just listen to a good hour of really quality rock music, and then an inspirational message about how we should all love each other. They gave us food, pizza, ice cream, all that stuff. And I loved it. I mean, it was a good experience for me, and I could understand why people would go there every week just for those things. I went there for those things plus education. And so it also reminded me of when I went to my normal church as a kid, and they would give me, for singing church songs, they would give me candies on the bus on the way to church. And then during church, they had Bible bucks. If you answered a trivia question right, they would give you a Bible buck. You could redeem it later for a time on the trampoline or candy or something like that. So these are all ways that they make religion appealing. And I could get up here and play my rock solo, but I'd rather just teach you guys information.
I was wondering about your feelings with regards to Santa Claus. I mean, it's a popular myth that we teach children, we have fun with it, and they get old enough, we tell them, well, that was just a joke, and yeah. But then religion is basically the same thing, it's just on a bigger scale.
No joke.
And the religious people continue to believe it after learning the story of Santa Claus. But I know some atheists, don't want to get involved with Santa Claus. It's not real. Let's not teach them falsehoods, but it's a cultural thing that's fun, and the kids seem to tolerate it pretty well. So do you think that that's kind of a positive thing for actually using to teach kids about how you can't trust all the myths that you learn?
I've heard it from both sides, and I think both sides have some good arguments, but my answer is a compromise. First, I want to say that if you do what you're describing and use it as a learning opportunity, I know a lot of people now today who feel betrayed by their parents, who feel still to this day that they shouldn't have been lied to, and they feel offended by that and stuff like that, and that's perfectly fine. Those are their feelings. But also there are people who say that it was a great learning experience. They learned to be skeptical. They discovered the clues. They found out that their parents were lying. So there are definitely arguments on both sides, and my personal opinion and how I was raised is that Santa can be more of a game than an actual truth. You can play. You don't have to tell them there's a real man who's going to travel to your house tonight and give you presents. That sounds kind of threatening anyway, like he's going to break into your home. But if you just play the game, you bring presents. You could my mom always used special gold cards for the Santa's presents. We knew that they were from her. They were the stuff that we asked for. But it was still fun. We put out cookies and milk. We did all the things that normal people do, but we used it as a game instead of a truth. And personally, I think that's the best compromise between those two positions.
Good morning. My name's Buck. Thanks for your work. A couple of things prompting my question. Your shirt, for one. And the other is a story I recently heard.
In Logic, We Reason.
Yeah.
We have some outside, too.
The other is a story I heard recently on a podcast about someone's child, 5 years old, being approached by a good news club at, I guess they were in preschool, but was at a grade school. And so that made me think, if you model skepticism and reason to your children, and if you teach them about what constitutes evidence and a fact, are we indoctrinating them by doing that?
I've said in a recent piece that I published was that you can't indoctrinate children with skepticism and rational thinking. These are ideas that directly oppose indoctrination process. You're telling them, question things that I say, question things that anyone says, look for the evidence, teaching them what the evidence really is. I mean, these are facts, these aren't opinions. So no, I definitely think it's impossible to indoctrinate kids with skepticism and rational thinking together, and scientific skepticism in general. And I think that everybody should do that. And I think that if that kid was approached and they had a good understanding of what skepticism meant, but they also had a good understanding of what religions are, then they would just laugh it off. And, okay, well, you continue doing you.
But what's this higher truth thing the other side's talking about?
It's not real.
Hi, I'm Sue, and I went to school in Santa Barbara.
Nice.
And just to
Good
let
place.
you know, around 1970, I took a class in comparative world religions, and we went to different religious locations, and so it was happening even in 1970. But I have a question about current schools now, the charter schools. My grandchildren are in Sonoran Science Academy, and if you know anything, I don't know if you know.
I'm unfamiliar.
It has a Muslim agenda. I don't know, they're not actually teaching it, but it is operated and run by Muslims. And I tried to discourage my daughter from putting them in the school. Now the children are asking more questions about God and whether they're going to hell and things like that. So I want to get your book for them.
Great. Yeah, I discuss all those things, and I think that in those instances, it's important to look at the curriculum itself. Like you said, it's owned or put forth by people who are Muslim, but if the curriculum isn't teaching God or religion or Islam or something like that, it could be entirely fine. Maybe they're science focused, maybe it's a good school, but it's really important to look at the specifics because you can't judge based on they're operated by a Muslim.
Yeah, my husband looked into the originator of this, and he definitely has a Muslim agenda. So I didn't know whether you were up on like the schools and what's going on with them, or any advice along that line.
My advice would be to get them into a public school. The best thing, if you're in a situation that you can't help like that, when your kids or grandkids or something like that are in a school where I've heard of people who send their kids to Christian schools or Catholic schools and they come back learning these things that they think are truths. The best thing to do is to properly educate them, if possible before, but during and after also works as well. The belief book specifically does mention Islam, it mentions God, it mentions hell. And I wrote an article recently for Friendly Atheist, if anyone wants to look it up, what to say if your kids are scared of hell, what to do if your kids are told about hell. And it happens all the time because they're told from kids at school or they're told from a TV commercial or something like that, and they are legitimately scared of this. So that's an important issue that I do touch on in the belief book, and then I have a separate essay that's important for that as well.
Okay, and how about how did we get here? Is that addressed? Like, how did we come to be without a creator?
Yes, definitely. You'll need more than just the belief book to explain where we did come from, but the belief book explains why people think these things that people think today. It explains how it makes sense, because if you woke up one day and you didn't know anything about the world around you, but you saw that you had food readily available, water that you needed, the heat felt good on your skin, all these things feel like they're for you, they feel divine. It's actually the opposite, that we are made for this earth, that we evolved to to enjoy and need the things that we enjoy and need. So that's touched on, but something like a scientific book like Dawkins has Magic for Reality is one that I'd recommend.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Hi, my name is Carlos, and I just recently participated in a meeting where they want to open a Christian school and a secular school, and people started talking about the great desires to have more secular school rather than Christian school. And that opened up my question is, are we envision in a future or near future the possibility that all these faiths become mythology?
Become what? Mythology?
Mythology, like Asian mythology?
I think that the time is the only thing keeping religions from being mythology. I think that in 2,000 years, it's very plausible that Christianity itself could be taught alongside ancient Greek mythology. But I also think it's important to note that there will be other religions at that time. There will be, in 2,000 years, religions that you and I couldn't even fathom, and they'll exist at that point. But then the religions of today will now be mythology. And that's, again, that's not my opinion. That's something that we've seen consistently throughout history. They start off as religions. Once they're no longer believed, they become mythologies. And so to me, there's really no difference. So thank you.
Hello, my name is Ruby Kaja. I'm an ex-Muslim, and I see this. I don't have a question. I have a comment.
All right.
Actually, what you're doing, I think it's revolutionary, and it's really needed at this stage, because I come from a place where religion has, not religion, let me say, radicalism has started very stealthily in schools 3 decades ago. We didn't feel it, but slowly it crawled until now. You see a lot of radicalism, and the older people are saying, how did this come about?
You let it.
You know,
let it happen.
we didn't know. They were crawling in our schools. So, and I'm not talking only about the Middle East, also it's happening in Europe. Now, I don't know if it's happening in the States, but I'm sure there are in some states. So this is counter to that. Rational thinking, where the children are taught things, or shall I say, are venomous things, without us knowing about it. Now, this is counter to that. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And I think that that is important. I think that if the kids understand rational thought, skepticism, critical thinking, even if they're taught those things, those venomous things in a public school, which unfortunately, as we know, happens all the time, they'll be able to question those things. They'll be able to talk to their parents. They'll be able to take up the fight, as many have, to get those things stopped. There's a lot of people in the United States who are kids who had to learn about young earth creationism in school, who now are actively fighting that fight, who are trying to get it stopped. I think the best example is Zach Copeland out of Louisiana, but it's happening all over where people are really fighting back, and that all it takes is critical thinking to do that.
Okay, let's give him a big hand. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. I would like to encourage you to go to the back. He has books for sale and shirts like he's wearing, plus some others. And then we'll go to lunch, and you'll go to lunch with us, I presume? Probably. Okay. And we can talk to him a little bit more there. We have a special room back there at the cafeteria that's private for us.